Welcome to the Indiana History Project. I'm your host, Norm Taylor, and we're at the beautiful home and estate of a friend of mine, Brent Gill. I guess we're friends, aren't we, Brent?
We are, Norm.
We are, okay, so we've got that covered. Brent was on a previous program. I know that many of you have watched it. I've had kind comments on that. And we're at his home because we have two special guests with us today. So I'm going to introduce Brent Gill, and we call him the Cherokee lawyer. Brent, you have a very special guest with us today.
I do, Norm. Thanks for coming. I have with us tonight my friend S.D. Youngwolf. S.D. is currently from Taos, New Mexico. S.D. is one of the most extraordinary Cherokee men I've ever met in my entire life. He is a Cherokee artist. He is an excellent Cherokee storyteller, and that's one of the things, the main thing that we're going to do with this program tonight is S.D. is going to put on his storytelling for us. S.D. has quite a background. He comes up and puts on shows and shows his works at the Idolsjorg in Indianapolis, and he stays with us when he does that. So we're doing this in conjunction with his stay because he's a long way from home. He was kind enough to agree to do this. He's primarily an artist, trained as an artist. He has quite a background in his artwork. He went to a couple of different art schools. He got his undergraduate, his BS or his BA degree in art in Sonoma State University in California. He has been a resident artist and a teacher in artistry throughout primarily the Southwest and the near Midwest and Oklahoma, Arkansas areas, but in the Southwest as well. He does oil paintings. He is an award winner from organizations throughout the U.S., Native American themed artwork, oil paintings. He does sand paintings, and he is a gourd artist. He has some of the most beautiful gourds. He does masks. He makes excellent masks, and he just got a #1 blue ribbon with a mask last year at Idolsjorg, one of these masks that he makes out of gourds. Beautiful, beautiful works. In addition to that, though, he's branched out his interest significantly in the last few years, in the last several years, in about the last decade. He has worked with different international organizations, and he is extremely involved in the preservation of traditional and indigenous cultures throughout the world. He's traveled throughout the world, and he lectures on indigenous rights and how to help preserve the cultures and traditions. He does that in conjunction with his storytelling. Quite a background in that. Like I said, he's such a multifaceted individual. In his past lives, he's been a shaman. He is a Hindu sadhu. He's a Buddhist monk. He has quite a spiritual background and spiritual training, as well as his artistry, his Cherokee storytelling, and which I think is the most important thing that he does, his work throughout the world, helping preserve indigenous cultures and traditions. And I'm very glad that he can be on this program. I think that your viewers will certainly enjoy his storytelling techniques.
I agree. I think we have been very fortunate. S.D., thank you, first of all, thank you for allowing to be with us today. You know, this is it's going to be a very special program because you're going to get to know S.D. in a greater way, and by the end of this hour that you're going to have a greater appreciation, I know, for what he has to say and for the person himself. And we appreciate, Brent, you having us here. We're only going to have the interview session. I know for all of you that watch my program, you're used for me going on for hours, seems like, but it's only going to be for a few minutes because we want to give S.D. a lot of time so we can hear his program. But S.D., let me ask you, because we only have a couple of minutes, but you have a passion for a lot of different things. I mean, there's something that drives you, though. What would you say? And again, we only have a couple minutes. We're going to get to know you better when we see your program. But what is the thing that really would say drives S.D. Youngwolf right now?
Well, it has to do with the spirit, and in different cultures you say it in different ways. But I like to use, even though it's not a term used frequently in Native American ways, I like to use the term enlightenment. You know, to realize the spirit, to realize it in your life and in the way you live. we have much to learn from our traditions. And unfortunately, many traditions in the world are dying out that have much wisdom. And so that's what drives my passion to a great extent, is in finding that and preserving it and in living it, because I consider myself first and foremost an indigenous person, or at least I aspire to be that. Because to be an indigenous person is to live in balance with the earth, with the spirit, and with all of creation.
You know, I work with young people, and you know, so I deal with the kind of problems they deal with every day. But my Native American friends, they tell me that they are concerned about them not picking up upon
Yes.
the culture, the spirituality, and everything of the Native. What do you feel about that? Do you think the Native, that the youth, are they catching on to this? Are they continuing what, or do you think this is
Well,
something
see,
that
that's
is
some
lacking?
of the work that I do, but there's so much one person can do. But I work with children of all classes and races, but I really enjoy working with Native American children, and especially those that grow up in urban settings where they are not in touch with their heritage. You know, but sometimes I'm really dismayed at how little Native American children and even their parents know about their own culture. And so I use art projects to use it as a vehicle for learning and understanding about traditional ways and values.
And do you think that your message is getting through using this?
Oh yes, I've had wonderful experiences of that.
Yeah. So you feel like the people are listening?
Yes, yes.
Well, that's what we're going to be here tonight. We want to give you just some insight into the life of S.D. Youngwolf, and also into the passion that he has. And I've been on the internet. I've seen some of his great artwork. It's fantastic. If you ever get a chance to, he's obviously very, very talented. But the inner, deep S.D. Youngwolf is what I'm really interested in getting to know a little bit more tonight. And that's what we're going to have here on the Indiana History Project. Brent, I want to say thank you again for letting us have it. We're going to be quiet. We're going to let the people hear this interesting young man. I can call you a young man,
Sure.
can't you? See, because you seem very young. We're going to let them listen. And tonight, we want to make sure you get your friends, tell them to come in, because I believe that there is something special that you're going to watch here in the next few minutes. So get your friends, tell them to come in. You've been watching the Indiana History Project. We appreciate you joining. I'm your host, Norm Taylor. I have with me Brent Gill and S.D. Youngwolf. Thank you for watching.
Okay. I say OCO to you. It's Cherokee for hello. I am S.D. Youngwolf. I am of Cherokee descent, and I am an artist and a teacher, and I like to tell stories. And so, first of all, I'd like to thank all of you for being here at this time. I'd like to thank Brent and Marina for making this possible. And before we start, I'd like to burn a little cedar for blessing. Many tribes use cedar for blessing and purification. There are a lot of stories about it. But first we'll offer this smoke to the four directions. And blessing for each one of you. In the old days, with Native American people, they would come together, they would acknowledge all the life that surrounds us, starting with the grass that grows, with all the different kinds of life that lives, and the four-legged and the winged ones in the air, and even to the sun and moon and the star people, because it's all a part of life, and it's all together. We depend on it. And so we acknowledge and honor it. And I'd like to start with a welcoming song that we might welcome the spirits, to honor the ancestors, that we always walk with the spirits, we always walk with the ancestors, and they're always with us. And whatever we do in life, we honor or dishonor them by our actions. And so it's good to be aware of them. Now I'm going to tell some stories, but I must tell you that in the Cherokee tradition, as with many tribes, the time for storytelling is winter. And sacred stories are usually not told during the summertime. But there's a way around that, and that is that we will imagine that this is the time of winter. You see, the stories were told during wintertime, because if you're telling the stories of the animals and you call their name, they might hear you and come. So you wait till they're asleep. The bear is in his den and the snake, he's asleep. So that's the time when you tell the stories. And even then, in the old days, you would announce, it is the time of winter, and I am going to tell this story. So let us all close our eyes, and we're going to imagine that this is the time of winter. It is very cold, and there's icicles hanging from the trees. It is very cold, and we would be in our lodge by a crackling fire, telling and passing on the stories from the old times. Now, if I forget, remind me at the end to melt that ice so that we won't go home with winter still around us. In the old days, the Cherokee people, there was an oral tradition that was passed down that said the Cherokee or Jalagi people came from the east, from a mountain that sank beneath the ocean. That there was mountains that belched fire and smoke. And the people had to leave, and they came to the west. And they spent time with people that we interpret that from what they passed on. It was the Central American tribes, the Aztecs and Mayan people. And then they migrated north to the Great Lakes area, and then east, which is still the homeland of the Iroquois people, who are the same people. The Cherokee are an Iroquoian tribe. But the Cherokee then came south. And Cherokee is not the traditional name. The traditional name is Aniyumwia, or the principal people. But the neighbors of the Cherokee call them Jalagi, those people that live in the mountains. And when the white men heard that, they heard Cherokee, and that's how it became Cherokee. And they're called Cherokee today. At the time of the coming of the white men, the people lived around the Smoky Mountains. And there's a story about how life came to Earth. They said that what is common to, as I found, many, many people around the world, they talk of an ancient time when the Earth was covered with water and there could be no life on it. Well, in the Cherokee version of that story, they said at that time the animals all lived up in Galunlati, the sky vault world. It was getting pretty crowded up there, people bumping into each other and stepping on each other's toes, and they're saying, we need some more room. And looked down and said, let's go down, live down there. Someone said, you can't live down there. Look, it's all covered with water. And so they said, well, let's see if we can change that. Maybe just underneath the water there's something solid. And so they sent different animals to go down there. You know, the duck went, the beaver went. They'd dive down, they'd be gone for a long time, and then they floated up, they had drowned. But it was finally the little water bug, little water beetle that went down there. Little teeny guy. And he was gone for a long time, but then he brought up a lump of clay. And when he started to spread it out, then magically it started to multiply and make more and more until it made a landmass. The animal said, oh, good, look, now we can go there. But it was still like mud, it was wet. And so it was the vulture, or what some people call the buzzard. He volunteered to go down there. He said, I'm going to fly over it and fan it with my wings to dry it off. So he did. He flew all over the earth, flapping his wings, drying that mud. But after a while, he got tired. When he did, he'd sink down close to the mud. When he flapped his wings, it would make a valley. When he raised them up, it would suck them up into mountains. And so he was flying, and he was making valleys and mountains and valleys and mountains. And someone said, hey, call that guy back here. There's not going to be anything left but valleys and mountains if we don't. And they called him back, but he had done a good job so that the animals are able to go down and live on the earth. And they say that where he made those mountains and valleys, that's what we know today as the Smoky Mountains, which is the homeland of the Cherokee people. Now I'm going to start with one of my favorite stories, which isn't really a Cherokee story. It came from the Creek, and it's called How Trouble Came into the World. The Creek were the neighbors of the Cherokee, and if you find that there's a lot of interchange between the southeastern tribes, particularly in their stories. They would tell stories to each other, and then they get their own flavor. Well, down there in the bayous of the south lived the alligator. In Cherokee, you call him Julasgi. Now, in that long ago time, the alligator didn't look the way he does today. He had smooth, golden skin. But in that time, just like today, he liked to laze about in the bayou, bask in the sun. Now, the rabbit, who in Cherokee he's called Chisdu, he is a trickster. Now, you understand that this happened in a time when the world was very young, and there was as yet no trouble in the world. Everybody has met up with Mr. Trouble nowadays. But back then, he was unknown. But that all changed one day when Rabbit was coming along a path, and he looked out and he saw Mr. Alligator basking in the sun. And he got an idea. And he started to sing this song that went something like this. Love that trouble, trouble so fine. I'm so glad that trouble is mine. Love that trouble, trouble so fine. I'm so glad that trouble is mine. And when that alligator heard the rabbit singing, he said, hey, Mr. Rabbit, what you singing about? The rabbit says, well, I'm singing about trouble. Alligator said, trouble? I never heard of that. What is it? Rabbit says, you mean to tell me, Mr. Alligator, that you don't have any trouble? I thought everybody had some trouble. Why, the Creator gave it out to everybody at the beginning of creation. Somehow, I guess you must have missed out. Alligator said, really? Well, that's terrible. I'm sorry I missed out on it. Said, but I don't know if I ever had any trouble. I don't know anybody's got any trouble. I don't even know what it's like. What's it like, Mr. Rabbit? And the rabbit said, what is trouble like, you say? Why, trouble, it's warm like a summer's day. And in case you ain't been told, that trouble shines just like gold. Well, I will tell you right out loud that trouble is white and soft, just like a cloud. You better get some trouble if you get the chance, because that trouble is going to make you sing and dance. Mr. Alligator, I'm proud to state that trouble is great. Alligator says, well, Mr. Rabbit, that makes me feel plumb bad. I really sure wish I had some of that trouble. The rabbit says, well, Mr. Alligator, maybe I could help you out. Maybe I could get you some trouble. Alligator says, really? You could get me some trouble? You'd do that? Rabbit says, you bet. You meet me here first thing in the morning, I'm going to take you and get you some trouble. Oh, that alligator could hardly sleep that night. But he was out there first thing, bright and early, waiting on the rabbit. And after a while, that rabbit come along. Mr. Alligator, I bet you out here this morning you ready to get some trouble. Alligator said, oh, yeah, can you get me some? Rabbit says, you just follow me. And he took him to an open field of tall grass. And in the middle of that field there was a hill. Mr. Alligator, you go climb up on that hill there and you just wait. That trouble's going to be along directly. Well, that alligator climbed up on that hill. He started looking around. And that rabbit, he set fire to the grass all the way around outside of that field. And when the alligator saw those flames coming up, he got all excited. He said, oh, that rabbit said that trouble, it shined like gold. That must be that trouble coming now. And that fire started to burn and put out billows of white smoke. The alligator got more excited. Oh, he said it was white and fluffy like a cloud. That's got to be that trouble coming. And when it burned real close, he could feel the heat of it. He said, oh, that rabbit said it was warm like a summer's day. I feel it. But when it started burning real close, it started to burn his toes. It started to burn his tail. And he started to jump up and down and holler, oh, this trouble's burning my toes. Oh, this trouble's burning my tail. And that rabbit shouted up there, Mr. Alligator, didn't I tell you that trouble's going to make you sing and dance? That alligator took off running through that burning field, and he jumped in the water. And clouds of steam rose all around him. And he looked down. His skin, it was no longer smooth and golden. It was black and crinkly, just the way it looks to this day. And that's why the alligator and the rabbit are not friends, and they do not go close to one another. Well, nowadays, just about everybody's met up with Mr. Trouble, but you just best not go looking for him like the alligator did a long time ago. Or at least that's what my grandma used to tell me. That's all. Now, you know, stories are a way of passing on knowledge and wisdom. And they may be humorous, but there's usually a teaching in the story. And I'll tell you a story. It's called The Most Precious Thing. They say a long time ago, there was a chief of the Cherokee. In those days, the Uku, the chief, he wore a turkey feather cape as a symbol of his authority. Well, this chief was getting old, and so he called the tribe together one day and he told them, so I'm not going to be around that long, and I don't know who's going to succeed me, but there needs to be someone to follow in my footsteps to wear this turkey feather cape. and be the chief of the tribe. He said, I don't know who among you would be qualified to do that. But I propose a contest. The brave who can go to yonder mountain there was a mountain in the distance, said, climb that mountain and bring back the most precious thing that you find. That will be the new chief. And 3 warriors stepped forward to volunteer. The next morning, the first warrior left. And long about nightfall, the sun going down, he came back and he had a bundle. And all the tribe came together and he laid out that bundle before the chief, spread it out, and inside there were all kinds of herbs. There was like roots and bark and leaves. He said, Chief, these are very rare medicine plants, very hard to find, but I found a place on that mountain where they're all growing together. He said, these, we could keep ourselves healthy. The tribe could be kept in a healthy state. Could probably even live a long time using these medicines. The chief said, well done. Well, the next morning, the second warrior left. He came back as it was approaching evening time, and he had a bundle also, which he laid in front of the chief, and he unwrapped it, and it was full of all different kinds of gems and stones. He said, Chief, I went up there, and I passed that place where the herbs were growing, but I came to this place where there's all these precious stones. There were emeralds and rubies, all kinds of things. He said, these, we could trade to other tribes for whatever we want. We could be wealthy. And the chief said, well done. Well, the third morning, the third warrior took off. Well, it wasn't even noon before he came running back to camp. He was all breathless. He said, Chief, he says, I went past the place with the herbs. I went past the place with the stones, but I remembered you said go to the top. So I went to the top. And when I did, I looked around and I didn't see anything. But in the distance, there were smoke signals. And those are our relatives. There's a village over there. And they've had a famine, they've had disease, and they've been attacked by enemies, and they're in a bad state. And they're not going to survive without our help. So I don't care about being chief, but those people need our help. And before he finished speaking, the chief was removing his cape and putting it around his shoulders. He said, you have understood the most precious thing that is in helping others. That's all. Now this is an old tradition of the story bag. So I'll pick out some stories to tell you, but I'm going to stop every now and then, and we'll have someone pick a story out of this bag, because it's full of stories. We'll see what comes out of there. Marina, you want to pick a story? You got the skunk. Yeetly, yeetly. They say, the skunk, this is a story about how he got a white stripe down his back. They say the skunk a long time ago, he was what you call a bully. He was big as a buffalo. And at that time, just like today, he had a spray, only at that time, if he sprayed you, it would kill you, you would die. And because he was like that, he was a terrible person. He pushed people around. If some animal someplace he wanted to be, he'd run him away. If they had something he wanted, he'd take it away. Now, in those days, in the olden times, in a lot of the stories, they talk about how the animals would come together and have councils and discuss their problems and come up with a solution to it. Well, the animals all came together to talk about this problem with the skunk. They say, it's not fair the way he is. They said, bullies are terrible people, but what can we do about them? Well, they hatched a plan. What they did was, there was a hill, tall hill, and they went up there and they built a big fire and they had a big boulder that they heated up red hot. And then they sent the raccoon to go find the skunk. He found the skunk. Hey, skunk. Yeah, what? I brought a message to you from the animals. So what is it? He says, you stink, man. He said, what? You don't talk to me like that. And he took off after the raccoon. And the raccoon ran straight to that hill with that skunk behind him. And he hollered up there, here he comes, get ready. He ran up that hill, and then he ran to one side, and just then they pushed that red-hot boulder off and went rolling down the hill, and it rolled over the top of that skunk. It knocked the air out of him, and it reduced his size. They say, the skunk, he didn't kill him. He's still around today, but now he's just a little guy. And he still has a spray, but at least he can't kill you with it. But he has a white stripe down his back from where that boulder rolled over the top of him. That's all. So I'll tell you the story of Kanadi and Selu. They were the first man and woman. And this is a love story. They say the Creator, Uneklana, he made a man. And that was Kanadi, the hunter. And Kanadi lived a pretty good life. He had a lodge for himself. He'd go hunting every day, but there was an emptiness in his heart. He felt lonely. So one evening, he knelt down and he talked to the Creator. He said, Creator, you've given me a good life here, but there's an emptiness in my heart, and I'd like a companion to share this life with. And then he lay down and he went to sleep. And while he slept, a corn plant grew up beside his head. When he woke up, he looked up that corn plant, and out from it stepped a beautiful woman. And that was Selu, the corn mother. And so Kanadi and Selu they lived as man and wife, shared a lodge. Every day, Kanadi would go hunting. He'd bring in game, and Selu would prepare that for his meal. And life was very sweet. And it continued that way for some time. But one day, it changed. Kanadi came home, and Selu wasn't at the lodge. He went calling her. He found her picking flowers. He said, what are you doing? She says, I'm picking flowers. Well, I don't eat flowers. Why isn't my dinner ready? She said, well, I thought you might like them, but don't talk to me like that. He says, I'm the man of the house. I do the hunting. I talk to you the way I want to talk to you. She says, oh, if you talk to me like that with such disrespect, I'll just go away from here. I'll never come back. Well, go ahead and you see if I care. Oh, this was the first spat, the first marital squabble that ever happened. Well, Selu was really angry, and she went stomping through the woods just saying, I'll never go back there. I'll never go back there. And Kanadi was saying, oh, she'll be back. And he went to the lodge. He waited, but it was getting darker and darker. He kept looking out the door to see if she was coming back, and he didn't see her. And then it got really dark, and then he started to really worry. So what if a bear eats her in the woods? What if I never see her again? And then he felt remorse for the way he had spoken. And he paced the floor all night. And when the light of dawn started to come, he decided to go follow her trail to find her. And as he followed her trail, he began to speak to Creator. He said, Creator, I'm really sorry for the words I said, but please take care of Selu. Don't let any harm come to her. And the Creator heard his prayer, and he took pity on him. Selu was still so angry, she was still stomping through the woods. And the Creator made up things to He made things to grow in her path to distract her. He made blueberries to grow, but she just stomped right past them and didn't see them. He made raspberries to grow, same thing. Blackberries, all different kinds of fruit trees. And she didn't see any of them. She was still so angry. But finally, he made strawberries to grow in her path. And when she saw those, the little red fruits close to the ground, kind of shaped like a heart, it stopped her. She stopped and looked. She said, "What is that?" She never saw anything like that before. And she picked it. She said, "It looks like it would be sweet." She tasted it, and it was sweet. And it reminded her of her life before she had quarreled with Kanadi, the sweetness of their life together, and it opened her heart. And she turned around, and she saw Kanadi coming in the distance. And she went running to him with a handful of strawberries, and she put one in his mouth, and then she hugged him. And they each said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I won't speak that way again." And they went home. But before they went home, Kanadi took some of those strawberry plants, and he took them back and planted them around the lodge. And so in the old days, in the Cherokee villages, whenever you go to a Cherokee village, you'd see strawberry plants when you got there growing around the outside. Because they say that would be a reminder that they always did that. As a reminder that no matter how angry you get, never forget that love is the most important thing. And that nowadays, it's good if you keep a picture of a strawberry or even some strawberry jam in your cupboard as a reminder. That's all. Okay, I'm going to sing a song. This is a blessing song. And there's an old story about the possum. In Cherokee, his name is Ujetsdi. Now, you have possums around here? You have possums, don't you? Yeah. We know what a possum looks like. They got like a hairless tail. Well, they say that it didn't used to. In fact, possum had the most beautiful tail with long, silky hair. Well, he was so proud of that tail that he always bragged about it. In those days, the animals would come together to have dances just like Indians do today. But whenever they had a dance, Possum would always steal the show. He'd jump up and start swishing his tail around and bragging on it. Nowadays, you know, you have what's called rap music. Well, some people think that's something new, but the way I heard it, Possum started it a long time ago. whenever he would dance, he had a song went something like this. Look at my tail, hey, check it out. I got the prettiest tail without a doubt. In the mountains, in the forest, in the hills or plains, my tail's number one. And that explains why when I go out for a walk, everybody stares, they just gape and gawk, because I got the prettiest tail of all. It's just the best. That's why it's called the beautiful, magical, just fantastical, mystical, logistical, irresistible, beauteous, the cutiest, attached to my bootiest. Just fantabulous, it'll really grab you his tail. But whenever he did that, the animals would all get disgusted. They say, oh no, there he goes again. I'm going home. They'd all go home and leave Possum there. Well, one animal who was particularly upset by it was Rabbit Chief-Do, because you know what kind of tail he's got. Little old nub. And Possum used to always make fun of him. He said, look at that little nub. You call that a tail? Now this is a tail. And Rabbit would get so mad. He said, I'm going to get that possum one of these days. I'm going to get him. One day he had an idea. And he went to his friend Taladu, the cricket. He says, hey, cricket. Says, you know how possum's always dancing around, swishing his tail in front of you and bragging on it? He says, yeah, I do. He says, I'm getting tired of that, ain't you? Cricket says, I know what you mean. He says, well, I got an idea how we can fix him. And he told Cricket his idea. Well, the next day, Cricket went to find the possum. He says, hey, Possum, I come over to find out if you're going to go to the dance. I said, what dance you talking about? Oh, the tail dance. Tail dance? What tail dance? You mean you didn't know about the tail dance we're going to have? No, what tail dance? He says, well, we're going to have a dance, and the animal with the prettiest tail is going to get a special prize. Oh, Possum got all excited. Oh, I want to be a part of that. Cricket says, oh, I think you should. But you know what? He says, what? He says, your tail's not looking too good. What? What's the matter with my tail? It looks kind of scraggly to me. I think it needs some combing and trimming up. So I happen to be a good barber. In fact, that's my nickname. That's why they call me that. Says, if you want, I could fix up your tail for you. Possum says, really? You'd do that for me? You bet. Says, you lay down right there, and I'll fix it up for you. Well, it wasn't long before Possum was snoring away. And Cricket pulled out his scissors, and he started to cut all that hair off his tail. And as he cut all the hair off his tail, he took a cord and he wrapped it back onto the tail. Tied it. And woke Possum up. Hey, Possum, I fixed your tail up real nice. But on the way to the dance, you're going to go by some briar patches and over some mud puddles. You want to keep it looking nice, don't you? I said, oh, yeah, well, I wrapped it up for you. He says, but when it comes your turn to dance, all you got to do is reach back there and pull that cord. That tail's going to fall out nice and pretty. Old Possum could hardly wait for the dance. The day of the dance, he was there first thing before anybody. Well, then the other animals started to show up. They all made a circle. And then the little animals went to dance first. It was the shrews, and then it was the mice, and then it was the moles, and chipmunks, and the squirrels. And then it was Possum's turn. Oh, he jumped up, and he says, well, finally it's my turn to dance. You got a treat in store, because now you got the chance to look at my tail all trimmed and set by my friend the Cricket, the best barber yet. My tail is pretty, my tail is fine. Now watch it twirl and see it shine. He reached back there and pulled that cord. All that hair fell off his tail. There was a pink, bare, naked tail sticking out there, and all the animals started to laugh. Possum says, what's everybody laughing at? And he looked around and he saw his tail and he says, oh no! And he fell down with his feet sticking up in the air, and he shut his eyes and grinned out of embarrassment. Well, Possum disappeared after that, and they hardly ever saw him anymore. To this day, you don't see Possum very much, but if you do happen to run across him in the woods, you know what he'll probably do? He'll roll over on his back with his feet sticking up and shut his eyes and grin, just like he did back then, because he's still embarrassed about his poor, bare, naked tail. Okay. Let's use the story bag. Who wants to pick a story? Raise your hand. Huh? Him, okay. There you go.
I'll get skunk again.
What do you got? Oh, this is the dream catcher. How the dream catcher came. Yeah, everybody knows what a dream catcher is probably, right? Anybody not know? A dream catcher? Yeah. It's a hoop with sinew that's woven like a spider's web. And you hang a feather from it. Maybe put a crystal in there. And they say that will catch your dreams. It'll catch the bad dreams. It will keep them from coming, and it will catch and hold the good dreams. Let's say the way that came was because of Spider-Man. Spider-Man, not like Spider-Man of the comics, but Spider-Man was a Lakota, and I guess the Ojibwe had him, that he could take the form of a little spider, or he could look like a human being. But they say there was an old chief one time. He was getting old, and he knew that he was going to leave soon. And he wanted something good for his people. And traditionally, in Indian way, if you want something good, they say you have to give something. And so he went up on a mountain, and he fasted and prayed for several days. Now, in the old days, warriors sometimes would carry a hoop like that. He had that hoop, and he had it stuck in the ground. And he saw this little spider coming from a long distance, coming up there. And it climbed up that staff to that hoop, and it started to weave a web. When it did, he started to talk to that old chief. He said, "You asked for something good for your people. This is a teaching that I bring you. If you watch how I weave my web, this is the way you and your people do too. You weave a web with the life that you lead. All of your good actions and your bad actions. Weave a web. And you catch either good or bad according to the way you live your life." That's the real teaching of the dream catcher. And he left that for him, and that chief brought that back and gave it to his people. And they would hang it over their children's beds, their babies, their cribs, to catch the bad dreams, to prevent them, to preserve their good dreams. But the real meaning, the real teaching in that is that the real dream catcher is what we weave with our own lives, with our own actions. So. Okay, I'll tell you a story. It comes from the Wyandot people about the big Indian. Once there was a village, and the village had a drought. No rain coming. The crops were not growing, and the people were suffering. And the chief called the people together and said, "We need help." He said, "If we don't have rain, we don't have crops, our people, we're going to starve and perish." He says, "I've heard tell that there is a very wise and powerful medicine man that lives in the north. We need a messenger to go tell him about our situation here and see if we can get some help. He might make it rain for us." And so a warrior stepped forward and he said, "I volunteer." And then another warrior stepped forward and says, "I volunteer," and a third warrior. So the chief said, "Okay, all of you go." So the next morning they set out. And they traveled to a river. They took a canoe and they went up the river. And they traveled all day, and at night they made a camp. The next morning they got ready to set out again when a strange warrior walked out of the woods and asked them who they were and where they were going. And they told him. He said, "Well, can I join you? I would like to go also." They said, "Okay." And so the four warriors continued on. They traveled for many days. After some time, they heard a faint sound in the distance. Listen, it was a drum beat. And they followed that sound and continued on up. They found this mountain, and that drum beat seemed to be coming from the top of that mountain. So they beached their canoe and they went to climb the mountain. And when they got to the top, it was flat on top, and there was a lodge, and there was an old man sitting out there beating his drum. And they approached him. He put it down. He said, "I've been waiting for you." He said, "I knew you were coming." He said, "And I know your situation. You don't have to tell me. And I will tell you now, when you go back, your village will have rain, and the crops will grow, and everything will be good. But it's a good thing that you sacrificed yourselves like this to make this journey for your people. So for that, I'm going to give each of you, I'm going to grant a wish to you." And he said to the first warrior, "What is it you would like?" First warrior said, "Well, you know, I love my people and I'm very concerned about them. So I would like to be a good leader. I'd like the wisdom to lead my people in a good way." And the old man said, "Very good. It will be that way for you." And he said to the second one, "And what would you like?" And the warrior said, "Well, I'm not a very good leader, and I'm not a very good hunter, but I care about my family. I want to take care of them in a good way. So maybe you could help me be a good hunter and provider." And the old man said, "Very good. It will be that way for you." And he said to the third warrior, "And what is it you would like?" And the third warrior said, "Well, you look at me. I am not a good-looking man. I consider myself an ugly man. But I want a wife. I want a family. And I don't know what woman will have me." And the old man said, "You may think you're not good to look at, but you have a good heart." He said, "When you return to your village, I have a granddaughter there. She will have you for her husband because she will see the goodness of your heart, and you will have a good family. It will be that way for you." And he said to the fourth warrior, "And what is it you would like?" And the fourth warrior said, "Well, I am a good leader. I am a good hunter. I am very handsome to look at, and the women all love me. But I want it to be that way forever." The old man said, "Oh, you think you're so great. You're a big man. So you think the women all love you, but they talk about you behind your back about how vain you are. But you've asked, and I said I would give it to you. You want to be a big man, you want to be that way forever, it's going to be that way for you." And he pointed his finger at him, and that Indian, he started to grow. And he got taller and taller and taller, and then he turned to stone. And I say, if you travel in the North Country, you come up there, there's a mountain. The side of that mountain looks like the profile of an Indian brave. That's stone. They say that's where that warrior turned to stone. And that should serve as a reminder to you not to take yourself and be so seriously and be so selfish in your life. But the most important thing is to serve your people. That's all. This is a song I composed. Spirits flying in the sky. hey yo. Eagle flying in the sky, thunder in the ground. Fire of the infinite, love is all around. Wisdom of the universe, always teaching me. Make your spirit singing in my heart for me, calling me to you. Flying in the sky, thunder in the ground. Fire of the infinite, love is all around. Wisdom of the universe, always teaching me. Make the spirit singing in my heart for me, calling me to you. As I was saying earlier to Norm, I consider myself an indigenous person, or at least I aspire to be that. Because I think a lot that's wrong with our world today is the loss of traditional values that are cherished by indigenous people. And a great part of that is living in a respectful way, a respect for Mother Earth, for all the life around us, and especially for each other. You know, in my travels, I have had the great honor to have the opportunity to meet and get to know tribal people of other lands, and I found that indigenous people the world over have many things in common. When I was traveling in India, I met people whose name are the Khasi people, and this Khasi woman asked me, "Tell me something about the Cherokee people." And I said, well, you know, the symbol of the Cherokee Nation is the 7-pointed star because there are 7 clans of the Cherokee. And she said, oh, well, our name means 7 families. And she told me their creation story about how they came down from the sky. I said, well, that's similar to ours. She said, well, unlike a lot of people, we consider the sun to be a woman and the moon to be a male. And I said, well, that's the same as the Cherokee. And I told her a story about sun and moon. She said, well, we have that same story. And then even to the way they dress to this day, it looks like the clothes that Cherokees, if you look at the old drawings of the early Cherokees, the way they dressed. But we shared stories, and she told me a story which I'm going to share with you. Of course, the land where they live is more tropical than the Cherokee country. They have different kinds of animals and wildlife. But they have a story about the peacock. It's called How the Peacock Got Its Colors. And they say, a long time ago, it started out like a lot of Cherokee stories started out, a time when all the animals could talk, and when they would have councils, and they would come up with solutions for whatever problems they had. Well, the animals and birds all came together. They had a council, and someone said, you know, we've been living for a long time, but you know that sun in the sky there, we couldn't live without her. She comes up every morning, gives us light, makes everything grow, gives us warmth. And we've never said thank you. We've never delivered a message of thanks. Someone should take a message to her, a message of appreciation to tell her how much we appreciate her. Well, at that time, the peacock looked very different than it does today. But at that time, the peacock was a very slim bird, and it was just kind of a grayish color. But it could fly higher in the sky than any other bird, and it was the peacock that volunteered to do that. So I will go to the lodge of the sun, and I will take the message. And they were all very happy. They said, okay, so the peacock took off, flew high, high, high in the sky until it came to the lodge of the sun. And the sun was overjoyed to have a visitor. She got very few visitors up there where she lives. And the peacock delivered the message to her. And and said, well, I should return. They go, no, no, stay the night. You've come a long way. Stay the night. I'll fix you a nice dinner. And she prepared the most delicious food. And she gave him the most comfortable bed. And the next day, they got involved in a long conversation. It was getting later and later. And she said, stay another night. I'll make a delicious meal for you. The peacock stayed another night. And this is the way it went every day. They would have a long conversation late to the night. She'd have a delicious meal and go to bed. Well, the sun became so involved in her conversations with the peacock that she started coming up later and later in the morning. And they noticed this down on Earth. They said, what's going on with the sun? And someone said, that's that peacock. Peacock's distracting her. We need to get that guy back down here. Leave her alone. Let her do her job. And they said, how can we do that? So they got an idea. Open field like that, you know, they said, they took flowers of different, seeds of different kinds of flowers and planted them in a pattern. So when they grew and they bloomed, it made a beautiful bird in the form of a beautiful bird. And when the peacock looked down and he saw that, he said, oh, who's that? I want to get to know her. He said to the sun, I really need to go back. I need to go home. And the sun said, oh, please don't leave me. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Thank you for the good times we've had here, but I need to go home now. And so the peacock took off to fly back to Earth. And as he flew, the sun looked down on him and shed tears. And when those tears fell on the peacock's back, it turned his feathers all green and blue, iridescent, the same way they look today. And when he got back to Earth, he realized he'd been tricked. And he started to fly back, but he'd gotten so fat on the delicious food that the sun had fed him, he couldn't fly back. And he was stuck here. And that's the way it is to this day. But if you watch a peacock, sometimes they'll fly up into a tree and look to the sky and utter a mournful cry. They say that's because he still misses his old friend, the sun in the sky. That's all. Maybe do one more from the story bag, huh? I could go all night, but I don't know if you guys want to. Here, you pick a story. The moon in the pond. Well, this is a story that's actually an African-American story from the South. You know, there was a lot of exchange between the African-American people that were brought over as slaves and lived in the South, and sometimes they would escape and live with the Indians, and there was a time when the Indians would be made slaves, and so there was a lot of exchange between them. And you find the same or very similar stories in both cultures. And this is about a time when the rabbit tricked the turtle and the wolf. The rabbit was walking down the road, and the turtle and the wolf were coming toward him, and he got an idea. He said he was hungry and he didn't want to go hunting up any food. So they're walking, he was approaching them, and he started to whistle and act really happy, and they said, Wolf said, Rabbit, what you looking so happy about? Oh, I'm going fishing. I found the best fishing hole there is. He said, really? Yeah, you can catch the biggest fish there. He says, but it's my secret. I'm not telling anybody where it is. The turtle says, oh, come on, Rabbit, tell us. We want to go fishing too. He said, oh, no, He said, I'm not going to tell anybody. And so the wolf, they were begging him to. He said, well, tell you what. So if you would, I'll tell you what, if you make up a nice picnic basket with lots of good food, you put some fried chicken in there, put some potato salad, put some coleslaw, some iced tea, all that. Says, then you meet me here in a little while, and I'll take you to my fishing hole. So they went and they got that together, a big picnic basket. He took them down to the fishing hole. It was a big pond. It was just starting, it's getting kind of dark. He said the best time to catch them is at night. But, oh no. I said, what? What's the matter? He says, well, we can't go fishing. I said, why is that? I said, well, look. It was a full moon. It was reflected in that pond. He said, the moon fell in the pond. The moon fell in the pond. Oh no. I said, you can't fish. The fish won't bite when the moon's in the pond unless you get it out. So tell you what, you get a long pole, each of you, you could push that moon out. So they went and got a pole and they went in there and started pushing that, trying to push that moon up out of that pond. That rabbit grabbed that picnic basket, ran off, and he had a great feast, and I guess he left there trying to get the moon out all night long. That's all. So I'll tell you a Cherokee story. This is told to me in Oklahoma about these two old Cherokee women, Minnie and Sadie. They were sisters. And they used to sit out on the porch. Well, Minnie, she didn't say much. She was kind of quiet. Now, Sadie, she liked to garden, and she had a nice rose garden. So they're sitting there on the porch. Sadie looking at her roses, and she said, oh, aren't those just the most beautiful roses? Minnie didn't say anything. After a while, Sadie says, oh, I sure love my roses. Minnie still didn't say anything. After a while, Sadie said, Minnie, don't you like my roses? Minnie said, it sure is noisy around here. She says, I'm tired of this. I'm going to go sit down by the creek where it's quiet. She left, and there's Sadie sitting there, rocking chair, enjoying her roses. But then she heard this noise, like, she jumped up and says, you pigs, you stay out of my roses. She couldn't see too good. She says, get away from my roses. That got quiet, and she sat down again. She was rocking back and forth, and she heard, she jumps up. I told you, stay away from my roses. Leave my roses alone. I'm going to get my shotgun after you. Sat back down and got quiet, and she heard again. She went and grabbed her shotgun. Blam, blam, blam. She looked. No more roses left. All those roses are gone. And she sat down, started to rock again, and she heard that noise again. Only this time she realized it was herself falling asleep and starting to snore. Okay, I'm going to tell you one more story, and that'll be it, okay? Is that enough? This is the great ball game between the birds and the animals. This is an old, traditional Cherokee story. Now, nowadays, you know, in Cherokee communities, they have stomp dance and they have the ball game, which is a similar game to what lacrosse is based on. Well, they say that in the old days, the animals and the birds used to play ball. There was a time when each of them would play ball, but only with each other. One day the birds were all in a tree like this, and the eagle was the captain of the birds. He was sitting at the top. And along came the bear and the tortoise and the deer under that tree, and they were talking. And they were saying, we are the best ball players. So those birds, they play ball. They couldn't be a match for us ever. The bear says, oh no, if we played with the birds, I'd just grab one and I'd crush them against my chest like that. And the tortoise said, oh, you know what I'd do? I would just jump on one of my shell and I'd crush him. The deer said, you know what I'd do? I run so fast, they would just fly away from me and be gone. Well, the birds were listening to all that. And the eagle says, hey, you guys, we hear what you're saying. You think you're such great ball players, so why don't you play us? They said, we'll play you any day. And so they agreed to have a ball game. And so, the night before the ball game, there was tradition to have the stomp dance. For the stomp dance, they would tie up a water drum. They'd stretch a groundhog hide over over a hollowed out log and use that as their drum. Well, they did that, and then in the morning they were going to play. Well, the birds were in the tree waiting, just getting ready to play the game, when these two little mice come running up the tree. And they said, "We want to play. Can we play on your side?" The eagle said, we're birds. Says, "Why don't you play for the animals? You don't have wings." They said, "Well, we wanted to play for the animals, but they told us we were too little. So we want to play for your side." They said, well, I don't know how you could do that. You don't have wings. But then one of the birds got an idea. It's the blue jay. He says, "Hey, I know what we could do. We got that groundhog hide. Let's tear it up." And they tore it into pieces and used sticks and pieced it together and put wings on one of those mice. And they said, "Try it out." And he jumped off and flew around. And he came back. He could fly. That animal, that became what is known today as the Plameja, the bat. But they used up all that hide. And I said, "Well, what about this other one? What are we going to do about him?" There were two herons. They said, "Hold up your arms." Held up his arms. They grabbed him under the arms. They pulled him, stretched out his skin. And he had that skin all stretched out. And he spread out his arms and he took off and he flew around. Came back. That's what we know today as the flying squirrel. Well, it came the time for the ball game. The birds and animals met on the ball field. The ball was thrown up in the air, and the flying squirrel swooped down and he caught it, and he threw it to the swallow. Well, the bear jumped up and batted the swallow out of the way and went for the ball. But the ball fell, and the skunk grabbed it and went to run with it. And the vulture swooped down to get that ball, but he missed. And he got the skunk behind his head, and he pulled a strip of skin off. That's why the skunk has a white stripe to this day. But when he did, that skunk raised his tail and he sprayed the vulture. And that's why this day the vulture stinks. And whenever you see vultures fly, they don't get close to each other. And when he did, he dropped that ball and it bounced and it got sprayed too. And the umpire said, "Foul ball!" And they threw that ball into the swamp and it took root and grew, and that's what we know today as the swamp cabbage. Well, they threw up another ball and the swallow came down. He grabbed that ball, he threw it to the bat. The bat caught it and he flew it to the goal, and the birds won the game. Meanwhile, the pink flamingos were all lined up doing cheerleading. Birds are cool, animals are lame. Come on, birds, and win the game. And the birds won the game between the animals and the birds, and they are proud of it to this day, and they haven't forgotten it. They say that's why the blue jay, whenever he makes a nest, he hangs a long strip of cloth from it, because that's to say the birds are number one, the winners of the game. They say that after that, the birds, they were so proud of their ball playing that they spread out. And the cardinal wound up in St. Louis and started a ball club. And that oriole wound up in Baltimore. And the bluebird, he kept going north and wound up in Toronto. That's all. Okay. I'm going to sing one song, we'll bring it to a close, okay? You'll probably recognize this song, but I'm going to sing the Cherokee version of it. Well done.